Good morning, everybody. Carpo here. It's June 8th, 2013. And I wanted to ask a question. Why do we argue as humans? And is it okay to argue? As a person who used to argue my point a lot, I find that there's certain people that you can argue with and some you can't. You're more likely to argue with someone who has similar views but is slightly different. That's why Christians argue amongst each other so much about different dogmas, and why, if you're in a certain group of person, let's say, it's funny because argument, in my opinion, is a natural process of elimination. And I've thought it over and over, and I thought, why do we argue? Why do we argue? Should I stop arguing? Argument is a natural process of elimination to express yourself and try to tell someone why you think a certain viewpoint is wrong. And it can be due to the fact that it could be done out of ego, or it can be done out of more, innocence, just wanting the person to understand where you're coming from because, say, you have more education on the subject or whatnot. But I compared it to nature, and if nature ignored unbalance, then the system would fall apart. And nature is, what we're doing is we're bringing forth truth by eliminating false beliefs or false thoughts. Of course, when we argue, we're not always right, and that's why we argue, is to try to figure out who's right, and whoever has the best points usually wins the argument. And it's not about winning the argument, it's about trying to influence each other to think a little deeper about the subjects at hand. Nature doesn't ignore imbalance. Nature takes care of it. If you look at you can look at nature two different ways. I see there's two different types of people in this world. There are the ones that look at the world as a scary place, where everyone's a predator, all the animals are out to get you. There's diseases, rampant, pollution, and everyone's going to die, and everything's chaotic. And then there's the other viewpoint of everything's calm, collected, and perfectly in order the way it should be. And you look at nature, a lot of people will say, look at it, it's perfect, it just flows, it flows. There's no chaos in nature, only mankind creates this chaos. Well, not chaos, I should say, because we all know that everything's chaotic, but the behavior of animals, and how, animals don't kill each other and stuff like that, and plants don't kill each other, but they do, they fight each other for space just like we do, they just do it on a different level. So, we have animals, we have plants, all battling for land and fighting over mates. Arguments can spew often from trying to argue over a girl. I mean, that's the old classic, arguing, two girls arguing over a man, or two guys fighting over a girl. And I think that's going to be a hard one to break because it's instilled within us. It's an instinct. All animals have it. They want to mate. They want to be the dominant person. So if you really think about it, the more intellectual person, the person who can who can win the argument and win the girl, is often the best mate, and I hate to say it, but that is just how nature works. But now that we have this conscience and we're able to consciously process things, we supposedly have these obligations to change our behavior. Supposedly humans are supposed to outweigh our instincts with reason and act accordingly. But sometimes instinct is what it is. And if you find... The funny thing is, you argue with certain people. My wife and I argue maybe twice a year, and it's very mild. We've never violently fought. We've shouted a couple times over the 15 years we've been together. And we try to keep, all the debates civil. It's usually about money and whatnot. It's always about money. But... or something, of that nature. It's about, struggling. People argue when they're in a struggling situation. And a lot of people haven't seen that, haven't struggled, so they don't know that or understand, but they argue for different reasons. And everyone has their own purpose for, debating and whatnot. So, arguments ensue over natural law. And, see, what my wife and I only argue maybe twice a year. While on the other hand, it seems like my mom and I argue every time I see her. Hi, Mom. And she watches my videos too. I don't understand why I argue with certain people more. see, my mom and I have very similar views. I mean, we're both into the ethereal realm and ghosts, spirits, UFOs, nature, God, whatever, consciousness. But out of a miscommunication of how each other thinks and the fact that she's my mother, we argue more. And I've tried really hard lately to not argue about stupid things. And I ask myself now every time I argue with someone, why am I arguing? And is this argument valid? And I've been analyzing not just arguments with people, argument in person, which is totally different than online. You don't know a person online. If you just, you may think that you know them well, but you only know their online presence, just like mine. I mean, I'm pretty much like this all the time. I mean, unless you know me, you don't know me. And so people will argue over a person's presence online, but they may not even be the real viewpoints a person has. The worst argument is when two people are fighting and one person says something and they get to the point where a person says something that is true, but the other person is so in defense mode that they deny it. And that's pretty common. Or change the subject, or pick at the other person. Projection is a big one. When people start arguing, they will project themselves onto you over and over. And so the question, I guess, is are arguments valid? Should we argue as people? Is it healthy? And or is it just something that we should get over and just have this peace love attitude? I watched a video the other day about it was on Tosin TV. I can't remember who got me into that, Alchemy or somebody, one of my subs. And this guy Paris, he was talking about something that I just made a video about, and it was really funny, about people who are entitled, but his was more about folks who are entitled to that are entitled to know more. People who have either more of an education on subjects, who are obligated to share with others, or people who have spiritual powers, healing powers, and whatnot. And he was talking about the ones who just choose to look at the positive all the time and say, well, I stay away from the negativity, and I won't debate, and I won't this and that. And it's like, you can't stay away from the negativity. You have to conquer negativity by shining a light through as best you can, but following your heart, so you're not just being an idiot. And but it was a really good point about how a lot of these quote light workers, whatever the truth may be about them, tend to just kind of dissociate themselves with the really harsh parts of life, the really people who really need help, and take in only the positive clients, and they only deal with positive energies, and that's great and all, but just as much an obligation would be to conquer the negative energies. And that's why I'm the kind of guy who, like I said, I stand up for what I feel is right, and if I see someone doing something wrong in society, I make a point to, I guess, get in a person's face, Like I saw these abortion protesters with these nasty signs the other day, and I stopped in the road and just bitched them out for like 10 minutes, calmly, and bitch them out, but I couldn't help but speak up. Whenever I see somebody acting like a dick in public, I have to say something. I'm always the guy that drives safely, but when I see somebody driving like an asshole, I honk at them. I can't help it. And I've gone through phases, waves, where I'm more accepting and then I'm less accepting, and it goes back and forth. But I guess in the long run, I think that nature has a view on arguments, and we argue for the very reason, the very foundation is to bring out what is real and expose what isn't through intense emotion. So, peace out. Have a great summer.